very good morning and happy Uposatha Day. So this is a very auspicious day. And in fact, the topic that we're going to discuss today is also very appropriate. The discourse is called the Shorter Discourse on the Full Moon Night. Of course, we are still in the daytime, right? But on a full moon day. So before I start the session and subsequently have some discussions, I think it is good that at least for the next 1.5 to 2 hours, we should focus our mind on what we want to do. We should always check our motivation, check our intention, why we are here. I think that's a very important thing for all of us to do, especially when we are listening to a Dharma talk, listening to the words of the Buddha. So I think it's always good to remind ourselves when we listen to any Dharma talks, right, on 4 things, right? So I just want to share with you these slides here. It said they are called the 4 Reliances, and I think they are very appropriate, very useful for us each time when we focus our minds to listen to the words of the Buddha. So the first thing is we rely not on the person, but on the words that we hear, right? And secondly, we rely not just on the words that we hear, but on the meaning of what we have heard. So we should always contemplate and analyze what we have heard. Then the third is relying not on just the provisional meaning, but the definitive meaning of the word. Okay? And finally, we should rely not just on having an intellectual understanding of what we have heard or our Dhamma talks, but to have not a direct, non-conceptual experience of what we have heard. Okay? So I think those 4 things tells us that when we listen to any Dhamma talks, right, we should always bear this in mind. Okay, so I thought I'll just share this with you. And today being a very auspicious day, on a full moon day, so let us see what we could learn from the teachings of the Buddha, as mentioned in the Shorter Discourse on the Full Moon Night. Now, for those who have been following the series, as Sister Yin Yen mentioned just now, previous week you listened to Sister Santi, who spoke to you about how a sappurisa does not have any intention to harm himself, harm others, nor harm both, right? And if you had been even in the earlier sessions, I believe Brother Ananda Fong also spoke to you about what constitutes the special qualities of a sappurisa. So just as a quick recap, which is found in the discourse itself, it's mentioned that the sappurisa has got 7 qualities. Right? He has got faith, he has got satta, that means the confidence, and then he has got what is called shame in doing wrong and fear of doing wrong. Now, these 2 are very important actually, because in the Culapunnama Sutta, Buddha spoke of 2 superheroes, and he called them 2 bright qualities that protect the world. So they are hiri, which is actually our conscience, and ottappa, respect for others, right? In the sutta, I think it's been translated as shame in doing wrong and fear of doing wrong. So these 2 words, or these 2 terms, hiri and ottappa, right? So they are very important. So you can actually read up more in this beautiful discourse called the Culapunnama Sutta. Now, this word Culapunnama means, loka, as you know, is the world. Pala is like a protector, like Dhammapala, someone who protects the Dhamma. So this has also been translated as protectors of the world, right? So, but so they are protectors of the world. They are not protectors of the galaxies, and not like the Hollywood movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy. So Hiri and Ottappa, well, they don't fly around the universe in spaceships, right, shooting lasers, but they are like the heroes you find in the movie Guardians of the Galaxies. But they actually patrol, you can say, the depths of our mind, where they swoop in to prevent the evil thoughts that may arise, which, as a result of that evil thoughts, it leads to actions, those actions which cause harm or afflictions to oneself and to others. Okay, so in this discourse, even though it's a very, you can say it's a simple discourse, but it has got a very deep meaning behind it. All right. So, so today I'm going to continue on the other part of the discourse, which speaks about right speech. Okay. But before that, I think by now all of you, especially you have been attending the past 3 series, you already know the meaning of sappurisa, right? So the word sappurisa it's been translated in different ways. I think if you look at Nyana Moli's translation, is a true person, right? I think the word true is because from this word sap and purisa, sap, from the word sap, S-A-P, you get the word satcha, the Four Noble Truth, so which is truth. So because of that, you have got the true, and purisa means person or a man. Right? Maybe today it's not politically or gender right to call men, right? So we say, well, what about women? Then so we say a person. Okay, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi uses the word a good person. So that's easier to understand. You say a true person. What do you mean by a true person? Am I a not true, a false person? So basically, it means someone who is worthy. All right, I think there's some of the other translation. Worthy, someone who is good, someone who is skillful, maybe. All right. I think Bante Gunaratana likes to use the word skillful. Right? So I think that's a very good word. Wholesome person, right? And I think what's it, Bhikkhu Thanisaro, there's another discourse called the Sappurisa Sutta, is translated as a person of integrity. Okay, so but you know this word sappurisa means something that is positive, something that is good. Okay. So I'm just going to extract this part from the Cula-punnama Sutta on speech. So there are two paragraphs here. He says, and how does a bad person means a sappurisa. That means you have the prefix a in front. Okay. So how does a bad person have the speech of a bad person? And here he says, when a bad person uses speech that's false and divisive, harsh and nonsensical. That's how a bad person has a speech of a bad person, right? I'm using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. So I think many of you are familiar with the four wholesome actions, four unwholesome actions. So under speech, you have got this four also. So sometimes nonsensical is translated as gossip, frivolous talk, okay? And then the second part of the Cula-punnama Sutta, Buddha explains, how does a good person have the speech of a good person? He says, when a good person refrains, in other words, he avoids speech that's false, that's divisive, that's harsh and nonsensical. Now, of course, we'll look at the positive aspects of each one in a short while. That's how a good person is a speech of a good person. Right? So that's how the Cula-punnama Sutta has explained sappurisa in terms of the kind of speech or the kind of words that he or she would use. Okay. But there's another discourse also of the same name is actually found in the Anguttara Nikaya. I'm not sure if this was highlighted by either Brother Ananda or Sister Shanti, but anyway, just two quick slides just to remind you if you have already been briefed on this. This discourse is on the in the book of gradual sayings, right? Here it says that the asappurisa, right? You see the Pali word say asappurisa. The prefix a in front is the bad person. Okay, so he says about speech, right? So I thought this is has got some relevance to today's talk. He says if you think of someone, a person who have got this not so good qualities, right? He likes to speak bad of others when you don't even ask about it. When he meets you, he kind of automatically ends up talking bad things about other people. Even you don't ask him. Now, what more if you ask him? Well, if you ask him, he will even make it more. He will sometimes even exaggerate all the bad things that he thinks that can be found in the other person. Right? So you see, the first pair is when he's not asked, he also speaks bad of others. But when you ask him, he speaks even more. He speaks in full. This is about others' bad deeds. Now, then the next pair is when he's not asked, he does not speak of others' virtues. So again, I'm sure you must have met some, some people or some friends or some acquaintances. When you meet them, they hardly would they speak of other people's good points. And when you ask them, oh, I heard so and so, has been very helpful in the temple. He has been very generous, or he's been doing a lot of good deeds, So this person, he speaks very little of what good things people have done, right? And then the next pair is when he's not asked, when you don't ask him, He does not speak of his weaknesses. He doesn't speak of his own faults. But when you ask him, then he speaks very little of it. Very little of it. He tries to hide whatever faults that he has. All right. And when you don't ask him, when he meets you, he likes to speak about all the good points that he has. He likes to praise himself. He likes to say, oh, what I've done, I've done so much, I've done this, I've done that, all the good things. Then when you ask him, can you imagine, he'll speak in full. All right. So I just summarize this what they call the 4 pairs here, which you find in the Sappurisa Sutta, or what is considered an asappurisa. Now, likewise, in the Buddha's teachings, he also talks about who do you constitute as a real sappurisa. Now, here again, you can reflect, you can think of people that you meet, someone that you meet. When you don't ask him, he does not speak of others' faults. When it's talk, it's not his nature to talk bad about other people. Even when you ask him, he will try not to talk bad about other people. He'll probably say, well, this is what I heard, but I'm not sure, so it's not fair for me to say things which I do not know, right? And even if he knows that certain things he has done, then he will say, yeah, this is what I heard, or this is what I saw, but I don't know why he did it. So he's quite reluctant to talk about other people's faults. Now, when you don't ask him, he likes to talk about other people's good points. He likes to think about, or he likes to say what are the good things that people have done. And when you ask him, he speaks much of it. He speaks a lot of other good faults. So likewise, when you ask about himself, he speaks much of his own fault. He will say, well, there's a lot of things I need to improve. It's not that he runs down himself. It's not that he has low self-esteem. No, he just he knows that there are areas he needs to improve. So he will not be shy. He will not be ashamed to tell you that, I think I should, learn to control my anger. I should learn to control my pride. So he knows what are his kind of defilements. Okay, so he speaks of his own faults, right? And if you ask him more, he said, yeah. I've been trying very hard. I've been practicing mindfulness. I'm trying to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness, trying to see how I could improve. And when you don't ask him, he's very happy to speak about other good faults, other people's good virtues, other people's qualities. And when you ask him, he's full of praise for good things that people have done. Okay, so here also has got to do with speech. So as you can see, the Buddha has got many discourses where he talks about the importance of speech. And I thought because this discourse, the shorter discourse on the full moon night, is about this idea of a sappurisa. So I thought I should bring this up right up front. Okay. So you may ask, why is it that the Buddha talks about this sappurisa? Is this sappurisa another type of an arahant? Right. So actually, to understand that, you have to understand that when the Buddha was teaching in India, he taught for 45 years. He did not only teach to monks and nuns. All right, not everybody that he taught became arahants, all right, or become fully enlightened. But yet, many other people, and I'm sure there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of lay people who listened to his teachings, and they benefited a lot, right? They benefited a lot, right? And so that is why, to understand why the Buddha introduced this idea of sappurisa, is important to understand that during the Buddha's time, the Indian society, well, if I could use the word India, right? At that time there was really no India. So the society where the Buddha was living was rigidly divided into, like you all know, the 4 castes, where what you do is measured by the caste that you belong to. Isn't it? Like you got the Brahmins, you got the warriors, you got the merchants, and then you got the Sudras. So I think the Buddha wanted to replace such a rigid caste system with a different social system where the primary significance is not so much one's social status, but one's inner qualities, right? In fact, there are quite a number of discourses the Buddha gave. I can think of the Asalayana Sutta, I can think of the Vaseta Sutta, I can think of the Vasala Sutta. So easily 3, if not more, suttas where the Buddha says, one is pure not by birth. One is pure by one's deeds, by one's thoughts, by one's speech. Okay, so all these things you find. So I believe that the Buddha developed a concept for good person that is not restricted to any social class, but is an idea which every social class should follow, right? So sappurisa is not necessarily, of course, it can lead you to become a sotapan or an arahant, but it's a good person in society so that you can live in peace and in harmony. Okay, so I think that's a little background of why the Buddha introduced this concept of sappurisa, the good person, right? Now, I think for us to understand this concept of right speech, in fact, for us to understand anything that the Buddha taught, we must not forget to always go back to the Eightfold Path, right? The Eightfold Path is like the fundamental core, the anchor for us to understand, for us to practice, and eventually to experience what the Buddha. Okay, so when we talk about right speech, now right speech doesn't operate on its own. Right speech cannot independently exist on its own. It has to be part and parcel of the interconnections in the Eightfold Path. And in another discourse, which I introduced to you here, which I hope you can, after this talk, you could make reference to, is called the Majjhima Sutta. This is the discourse on the Great 40. All right. Now, this discourse actually explains much greater detail on the Eightfold Path. Okay, so I think this is a very good discourse, right? And of course, there are a few more. So here, I've just extracted one part of this discourse. It says 3 factors that circle around right speech. First is right view. That means one understands wrong speech as wrong speech and right speech as right speech. And of course, right view is based on the premise that one understands that every action has consequences, right? Which is a law of karma, isn't it? Which is a law of karma. Every action has consequences. Now, our action is speech and action. It is an action. I'm sure last Sunday, Sister Shanti, when she speaks to you about the word wills or intention, you must have been introduced to this concept called cetana. Cetana is intention. So the Buddha mentioned, for example, in the Nibbedika Sutta, that what is karma? Karma is intention. So cetana is our intention. So our intention, whatever we say, has to start with intention, isn't it? You can't be saying something if you don't have that intention, you don't have that will to say. Okay? So right view. So understanding that all actions have consequences. So that is a right view. If you don't have that view, you would think, oh, it doesn't matter. Whatever I say has got no consequences. Indeed, it has. Right? So that is an important point. That is why in the Noble Eightfold Path, right at the pinnacle, right at the very top, you must have right view. So even if you are an ardent meditator, you could sit for hours, you could sit for a long, long period of time, but if you don't have a right view about what is right mindfulness or what is right concentration, you're not going to get much progress in your practice. Okay, so very important for us to make sure that our practice and our study is rooted in right understanding. Okay, so the Eightfold Path. And then, of course, you must have right effort, isn't it? All right. And then right mindfulness. You see, right mindfulness is very important. So mindfully, you abandon wrong speech. Mindfully, you enter a pond and abides in right speech. Okay. But we also know that mindfulness by itself is not enough, isn't it? You cannot only have right mindfulness. As U Tejaniya explains so succinctly in his book, awareness is not enough. Right? So mindfulness alone is not enough. That is why if you look at the Satipatthana Sutta, it says that for mindfulness to be effective, satima, it must have 2 other qualities, isn't it? It must be atapi, ardent, atapi. What is ardent? ardency. That's right effort. If you have no effort, you're not going to put into practice your mindfulness. And then just by being mindful again is not good enough. You've got to know, you've got to have clear knowing. Or what Ajahn Sumedho in his talks, in his teachings called intuitive wisdom. Right? There's different translations. The Pali word is sampajana. Right? I always use the word what do you call it? Clear comprehension. Right? So for you to practice mindfulness, you must have right effort. You also must have right knowledge, sampajana. And sampajana again goes back to right views, right knowledge. Okay, that's why Ajahn Sumedho, or now they call him Lompo Sumedho, is he called it intuitive wisdom. So you see, even in the Satipatthana Sutta itself, where the Buddha talks about developing satima or mindfulness, so you must have ardency, you must have effort, and you must have right view, right effort, and right. So they're all interrelated. You cannot divorce each one of them. So when we study the Buddha's teachings, when we practice the Buddha's teachings, always remember it must be anchored in the Eightfold Path. All right? So I think this is a very important part. So once we have that frame of mind clear, then we can look into what the Buddha meant by right speech. Okay? So I hope that set the stage for us to later look into various suttas or discourses which the Buddha talks about speech. So just a little bit more before we go into those specific suttas. I think, what is mindful speech? Because just now the earlier slide talks about mindfulness, right mindfulness being a very important component of it, right? So here I just like to mention that right speech is mindfulness practice where we commit to greater awareness of what we are about to say before we say it. Now, please remember this slide, because my final slide would be based on a discourse which the Buddha gave to his son, Rahula, right? In other words, what do we do? Things that we think, things that we say, things we do before, during, and after, right? So, and anyway, this is just like a preamble to it, okay? So remember, right speech is mindfulness practice where we commit greater awareness of what we are about to say before we say it. Always remember. And thus offers us the freedom to choose when to speak. So if we are mindful enough, then we know before we say it, we have that thought. And thus we have that freedom, we have the choice when to speak, that will, so to speak, when to speak. And then when we know when to speak, we know what to say, isn't it? And what to say, and eventually how to say. Now, later on, you will find that the Buddha on different occasions gives specific suttas on what to say, when to say, and how to say. Right? So the Buddha was a genius in that sense. He was definitely a great communicator. All right. That is why in Bhante Gunaratana's book on the Eightfold Path, he calls it the 8 skillful steps to happiness, and he translates Samma Vacha or right speech as skillful speech. Because like the Buddha, he was very skillful. He knows what is it he's going to say. So before he says it, he's very careful. He's very guarded what he wants to say. And he knows when to say it. It doesn't mean that because it is true, he simply blurt it out. He knows when to say it. He knows what to say. All right? Even if it is true, sometimes he may not say it. All right? Later we'll see why. What do we mean by that? And then how to say it. All right? So that requires a lot of skill. Okay? So we learn to restrain our speech in moments of anger, hostility, or confusion. And over time, to train the heart to more frequently incline towards wholesome states such as love, kindness, compassion, and empathy. Right? So another key component of mindfulness, as we say in right mindfulness, is that it always has this component of kindness and compassion. I think, who is that? The Venerable Ajahn Brahm. What is the word he used? Kindfulness. Have you heard of the word kindfulness? Have you heard Ajahn Brahm using the word kindfulness? It means mindfulness is a combination of kindness, and compassion. So I think we have to be very guarded that when we practice mindfulness, the knowledge of kindness, the knowledge of compassion must always be part and parcel of our practice. Right? So that's why Ajahn Brahm likes the word. He likes to use the word kindfulness, which I think is a great term. Okay, so those of us who are very excited or very into all these mindfulness things, so we have to be careful. What is the difference between what I call secular mindfulness and Buddhist mindfulness? Right. In fact, this is just an advertisement. Right. I think in December we're going to organize a forum on what's the difference between secular mindfulness and Buddhist mindfulness with Venerable Arya Dhammika from SBS and Venerable Thupten Children. So we're going to look at what is right mindfulness from as taught by the Buddha in the Pali Canon, and also mindfulness as taught in the Tibetan Buddhist scriptures. So we've got two great monastics, right? So take note of the date. It will be in December 12th, right? So, but of course, it will be online. Thanks to COVID, we're not going to meet. Okay, right. So back to what is found in the shorter discourse on the full moon night, where the Buddha talks about the four aspects of right speech: abstain from lying, abstain from slander, abstain from harsh speech, and abstain from idle chatter. Now, in that discourse, the shorter discourse on the full moon night, all these four are not really explained in details, right? So if you want a more detailed explanation, I've mentioned here another discourse here. It's called the Magga Vibhanga Sutta, a discourse on an analysis of the path. So you see, there are also other discourses which explains about the Eightfold Path, besides the discourse on the Great 40, which I mentioned earlier. So this is another great discourse, which I hope you will make reference to. It's called the Magga Vibhanga Sutta. And there the Buddha also explains what is meant by right speech. Okay, abstain from lying, abstain from slander, abstain from harsh speech. Now I've used use the translation as idle chatter. Right? I think in the earlier text the word used was from nonsensical speech. Okay, so they refer to that. Now let's look at what are the causes. All right, what are the causes for all these things? When we lie, when we slander, when we carry out harsh speech, when we have idle chatter, all right, then the causes usually for lying is either due to greed or due to hatred. When it is slander, most of the time it's due to hatred. Harsh speech is also due to hatred. And interestingly enough, when we engage in idle chatter, it is delusion. Right? It's delusion. So the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha was, as I say, was very skillful. He not only tells you that these things are not right, these are not what a sappurisa would engage in, but he also tells you why, what actually are the causes behind it. Because if we understand the cause, then we can overcome it. You don't understand the cause, you cannot overcome it. You can say the entire Buddha's teaching is actually based on cause and effect, isn't it? Right? Cause and effect. So every aspect is very important for us to know what is the cause behind it. All right? But as usual, there's also the antidotes. So the Buddha is always very clear that he tells you this is the problem, he tells you this is the cause, and with his confidence, with his saddha, with his conviction, he knows what is the solution to all this. And you can see this clearly reflected in the Four Noble Truths, right? Isn't it? The Four Noble Truths. The first Noble Truth is something that is not right, the problem that we all have. And the second Noble Truth is about what is the cause for that problem, for the difficulties that we all experience. And the third Noble Truth is actually about his conviction, his faith, his confidence that it can be overcome, that there is a solution to it. And finally, the fourth Noble Truth is actually his solution, his prescription, his medicine, his cure for overcoming all those problems that we have, those difficulties that we have. So lying, for example, what is the reverse? So you overcome lying with truthful speech, right? You overcome slander with harmonious speech. In other words, whatever we want to say, we always ask ourselves, that speech, when I say, is it going to lead to harmony? Is it going to lead to disharmony? By me saying it, it's going to lead to a breakup in relationship between two persons. Or it's going to lead to unison, friendship, or enmity. Remember the earlier slide, I was talking about being mindful. We all have a choice. We all have a choice. All right, so we can decide whether whatever we want to say, and we know that it's going to lead to disharmony, do we still want to say it? If you are a sappurisa, then you will not say it, unless you want to be an asappurisa. Okay, so harsh speech, we replace it with kind speech. An idle chapter, we replace with useful speech. We ask ourselves, whatever we're saying, is it useful? Even when the Buddha was living in India at that time, I think in Greece there was this great scholar, if I call him, Socrates. Have you heard of Socrates? Socrates has something which is similar. It's called the triple filter test. Right? You can Google that. Right? Because of time, I don't have time to go through to explain to you. You can Google what is Socrates' triple filter test, which is very similar to what the Buddha was teaching in India. Now, I don't know, at that time, they definitely don't have internet, so there's no way they could have connected. Maybe it was through mind transmission, so Socrates or the Buddha could have communicated. But when I look at the triple filter test, it sounds so much like what the Buddha has got to say in the Abhaya-raja-kumara Sutta. So strange, right? Great men, like they say, great men think alike. So, so whatever we want to say, I think one way is always to remind ourselves, keep it at the back of our mind. If you cannot remember all those four things, the four things that I mentioned earlier on, you can't remember all this. What I do, my practice, I try to remember these two sentences. All right, this is one of my favorite texts. It's called The Bodhisattva's Garland of Gems by Atisha, which says that when in the midst of many, let me keep a check on my speech. When remaining alone, let me keep a check on my mind. When we are alone, you think that nobody knows what you're doing, right? Your mind knows what you're doing. So you always, when you're alone, tell yourself, keep a check on your mind. But when you're in the midst of many people, look, we have to say something, right? Right? You are in the midst of many people, I don't think you should be observing silence, right? Or noble silence. Then why in the midst of many people, right? So when you're in the midst of many, please keep a check on your speech. So be very careful what is it you have to say. So just remember this too. I think this will go a long, long way. All right. So the great Atisha has given us these wonderful teachings, and I always carry this with me as much as I possibly can. Of course, sometimes not very successful. Right? Okay. Right. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce to you some of the various suttas. Now, I've just given you extracts because there's so much that we can cover, but because of time, I have another 10 minutes, right? So I'm just going to run through very quickly to pick out the key points, and then but leave you the name of the discourse so that you could, after this talk, you could go into details. So here in the Vacha Sutta, Vacha means speech, right? Vacha means speech. The Buddha told his monks, of course, obviously it was addressed to the monks, but then as lay people, we can also see whether are these relevant to us. He says a statement endowed with 5 factors is well spoken. So as a sappurisa, what is a well-spoken speech? Okay, so here the Buddha says, it is spoken at the right time. It is spoken in truth. It is spoken affectionately. It is spoken beneficially. It is spoken with a mind of goodwill. So there are 5 things here. All right. So you can remember this. Right. Make sure it's the right time before you want to say anything, even if it is true. Secondly, it is true, obviously. And thirdly, it is spoken with some kindness. All right. And then it is spoken usefully, beneficially, and spoken. That means your mind has got goodwill. Right. Quite similar to you speak affectionately. Right. But here we're talking about the mind. In other words, the mind itself has got thoughts of right thoughts, thoughts of kindness, thoughts of compassion. And then after that, it is expressed in speech. So the second one, it is spoken when it is expressed. But ultimately, it is spoken with a mind of goodwill. Why? Because the mind is as in the Dhammapada, the first verse of the Dhammapada, it says the mind is the forerunner of all things, right? Mind is very important. So among this well-spoken speech, ultimately, it must be spoken with a mind of goodwill. So how do we cultivate that mind of goodwill? That means we practice, for example, we practice the 4 Brahma Viharas. We practice loving kindness, we practice compassion, we practice loving, what do you call it, sympathetic joy and equanimity. Then we do that long enough, often enough, it becomes habitual. So we cultivate a mind of goodwill. Then our speech will be well spoken. Itivutaka, this talks about danger of lying. He says the person who lies, who transgress in this one thing, transcending concern for the world beyond, there's no evil he might not do. So it starts with that speech. Right? Now, in the Abhaya-raja-kumara Sutta, I think this is the classic one. Some of you may have heard this, or I may have explained this in an earlier talk, where the Buddha gave this discourse to a prince. So he wasn't talking to a monk, he was talking to a prince. Right? The name of this prince was Abhaya-raja-kumara. Translated, it means the prince who has no fear. Right? He must be a fearless prince. So the Buddha says, the Buddha says, the one speech, for example, can be spoken in 6 different ways. Your speech could be false, could be useless, unpleasant. Your speech could be true, but it's useless, unpleasant. Your speech could be true, it's useful, it's unpleasant. Your speech could be false, useless, pleasant. Your speech could be true, useless, pleasant. Or your speech could be true, useful, and pleasant. So after today's talk, please go back and contemplate and think of various examples, how each one of it, how your speech could fit into each one of it. Okay? So here the Buddha talks about it. And the one I've bold in red means this is what the Buddha would speak. So the Buddha would only speak something that is true, that is useful. These are the 2 common denominators. Sometimes it could be unpleasant and sometimes pleasant. Okay? So when a statement is true, useful, and unpleasant, Buddha knows the time to say it. So if you want to be a sappurisa, so you learn that whatever is true is useful but not pleasant for the other person. You ask yourself, is that the right time to say it? If it's not the right time, don't say it yet. Okay? But if you know that statement that you're going to say is true, is useful, and is pleasant, Buddha will always say it. All right? So you can always say, if you know it's true, it's useful. Pleasant here could means that it's pleasing to the person's ears. All right? In other words, it will lead him to be happy, it leads him to be more maybe calm, right? He will always say it. And then in the Vangisa Sutta, when the Buddha was talking to the monks, the Theragatha, the Buddha said one should speak only that word by which one would not torment oneself nor harm others. So a little bit like what maybe Sister Shanti was talking to you about the previous week, right? The word is indeed well spoken. One should speak only pleasant words that are acceptable to others. So what one speaks without bringing evils to others is pleasant. Now, here in this particular Vangisa Sutta, the Buddha did not say that about unpleasant speech, right? But in the earlier discourse, Buddha said sometimes even when it is unpleasant, he would say it, right? For example, in the fire sermon, Ariya Pariyana Sutta, the Buddha said, he told the monks, your eye is on fire, your ears are on fire, your tongue is on fire, your 6 senses are on fire. So it's not very pleasant to hear that. But he says it because it will drive them, or instill in them that atapi, that ardency to actually practice, right, to go on that practice. So sometimes he would say it. So depending on the situation. That's why he said it. That's why Bhante Gunaratana says that Buddha was very skillful on what he wants to say. And if you study the Mahayana tradition, there are a lot of all these skillful techniques, how you actually convey the teachings to to disciples and so on, right? So harmless speech. Now, the last slide here, I thought I'll just take from the Ambalattika Rahulovada Sutta. This is a discourse to his son, Rahula, right? Rahula. So just three more slides here to reflect. So here the Buddha was talking not just about speech, but I thought, we could also, I could also bring this in. So the Buddha says, before you want to say, in our case, before you want to say something, ask yourself, will this mental, verbal, or bodily action cause harm to me and others? So in our case, we're talking about speech. So will this verbal action, that means speech, cause harm to me and others? If yes, don't do it. If no, then carry on. This is something you have not said yet. Okay, so this is for the future, right? And then after you have said it, so the Buddha told his son, then you assess, is this verbal action that you have just said, is it causing harm to you and to others? Now, if yes, stop doing it. Stop saying it. If it is not, carry on. You see? So the Buddha was very systematic, very skillful. Before you say it, while you are saying it, the present, right? The present while you're saying, and the past. Then you review. Did this verbal action cause harm to me and others? If yes, don't do it again. Don't do it again. If no, then it's a wise action. It's an action of a sappurisa. Then you continue to do it. You see? So I think this, so I find this very, very useful. In fact, in this discourse, the Buddha told his son, Rahula, to look at a mirror. Look at the mirror, because the mirror reflects an image of yourself, right? Okay? So remember, for the future, before you say it, ask yourself, will this speech of yours cause harm to you and others? If yes, don't do it. If no, carry on. You are currently saying it, right? Is this speech causing harm to you and others? You are now saying something, and as a result of what you are saying is leading to a lot of anger, leads to a lot of conflict, between two persons. So if yes, you better stop saying it. If no, as a result of what you are saying, people are very pleasant, people are very happy, people are, peaceful, then continue. And then it's already been said, it's already been done. You can't do too much. So you ask yourself. So the Buddha always said we must reflect. Did this action cause harm to me and others? If yes, don't do it again. If no, that is a wise. You continue doing it. Okay. So I think this is a very good, it's a wonderful teaching. So you can, again, my request to you is to look up this Ambalattika Rahulovada Sutta. It's a very long name, but you can look at it under MN61 and you can find it. So finally, the last slide is mindful speech. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it timely? Is it harmful? Is it useful? Right. So always ask ourselves this. Then if we can put this into practice, right, then you find that we are behaving like what the Buddha says in the shorter discourse on the full moon night. We are becoming a sappurisa. Right? So let us end. So let me end by in our speech. Prayer is a speech, right? So let us make this prayer for the benefit of all sentient beings, especially on this very auspicious day of. So let us make this prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from bliss, and may they always be without suffering. And may all sentient beings be in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Right. So thank you very much. I think we have about 20 minutes. So whatever has been useful, please take along with you. Whatever you find not useful, please leave it behind. Okay? And if you have any questions or any comments, I'll be quite happy to respond to them. Thank you.